Hi there, and welcome in our first episode of the onboarding video we specially made for all participants of the Microsoft Sales Mastery Journey developed by me, Hans de Meijer, and my colleague in Germany, Claudia Simon. In episode 1 of the onboarding video, I will briefly guide you through what I baptized From Zero to Cloud Hero, a brief history of cloud computing, the way Microsoft developed things. And I planned to dress up as grandpa, telling about the old days, but maybe I look enough like grandpa, and I'm going to keep it quite, let's say, inspiring for all of you. This is the first episode in a series of 2. In the second episode, we will get into details about what Microsoft currently offers, but let's now discover how it all started. And for that, we're going to go back into the past. And if you look at the customer of the 80s as compared to the customer now, I mean your customers, basically what they all do in this area here hasn't changed. Most of them still manufacture something, they market it, they sell it, they take care of the customers, and that's how they make money. The big difference is here. The big difference is in the resources, because the activities haven't changed that much either, although I do admit technology has enabled a lot of things, but basically we still do what we did in those days. But the workplace looked totally different. Can you imagine? This really looks like where I started my first job. You know, no computers, just a lot of paper, things to write, a typewriter hidden in a corner, and then these fixed landlines to make phone calls, which is what we practically did all day. Interesting way of working. If we had to communicate in a more official way, well, there was no email yet. So what we did was we used fax machines. You still find them every now and then, but most of them have now disappeared and been replaced with more sophisticated tools to work with. On the other hand, when we had meetings, everything was written on sheets of paper. We had still brilliant brains remembering things. And then, every now and then we took things down in our personal notebook, and that was that. So I remember the whole 80s without a lot of IT. Does that mean that there was no IT? Of course not. There was IT. From a personal point of view, I had a TRS 80 personal computer. Friends of mine had the Commodore 64 computers, which you find every now and then. And of course, companies did invest in computers, but they were almost not present because way too expensive. And then somewhere, 80s, 90s, there was this brilliant guy who you recognize, Bill Gates, from a company called Microsoft, at the time relatively small company, I would say a startup. And he had a vision. He said, in my vision, I see a computer on every desk and in every home running Microsoft software as cherry on the cake. Well, an interesting ambition if you ask me. Certainly, if you know that computers at that time looked a bit like that, you know. This is an example of, I think, an 8086 or an 8286, which came with maybe 100 megabyte of hard disk space. Memory, operational memory, was still expressed in kilobytes, not in megabytes or gigabytes. And they costed quite a lot of money compared to what you got. And when I say quite a lot of money, about 2,500 euros now. But don't forget, we're somewhere late 80s, beginning of the 90s. But they became popular and companies bought them, and IT resellers were happy to sell them because that was quite a lot of margin you could make on these computers. And within companies, we saw the birth of peer-to-peer networks, that is, computers linked up to one another and maybe a printer somewhere. And so everybody could share some resources and communicate in between. Very simple things for the small and the medium company. In bigger companies, of course, we saw more advanced systems like these mainframe computers you see over here. And Well, you must have seen them, these dumb terminals with green or amber colors that kind of give you text-based information. I remember those days I worked at a leasing company and I was documenting software that had been written on an AS400 mainframe using RPG2, this development language. So it was a lot of code and that yielded into screens with information for handling all kinds of operations. Fascinating times, but really not very agile, really heavy stuff. On the lighter side of things, Microsoft was developing Windows 95 and Windows NT Workstation. And I still remember the day when 95 was launched. It was like, wow, a multimedia experience. And the frustration when we were then on professional workstations with Windows NT, much more robust, much more secure, but a lot less sexy. But together with 95, Windows 95, the internet opened its doors as well. Because all of a sudden, you changed from a text-based interaction with what was out there in the cloud to a very rich multimedia experience. But the good side also came with a dark side, and that is the security threats. So the internet was welcomed with open arms, but at the same time, it was the start of a whole new industry, the cyber security industry, which is still and even has never been more important than today. So computers got connected, and we also saw the evolution from peer-to-peer networks into client-server networks. And you may ask yourself, Hans, why are you telling this? Well, because this kind of networks was the basis for cloud computing. Because if you look at the modern networks, you still have clients that are maybe tablets or PCs or laptops, and the server, which is now no longer running on premise, but in the cloud as a virtual instance. But at that time, it was a very popular thing, a very popular concept. And obviously a lot of IT partners started to sell servers. And for the smaller companies, Microsoft launched in those days Windows Small Business Server, actually, yeah, a disk with Exchange, with SharePoint. And it was like an all-in-one smooth installation. It actually, if you look back on it, is a bit like Microsoft 365, but then the very premature version of it. And of course, for the bigger companies, they had a wider range of server licenses and server software to manage databases, operating systems, do backups, etc. And these were all sold under the form of licenses with disks, who had to be installed and managed and so on and so forth, most of the time on premise. It must have been somewhere beginning of 2000, 2003 when Microsoft started their first steps in the cloud. And they launched Business Productivity Online Suite, also known as BPOS. Now look what was in there. The first version of Exchange Online, a lot of email was still handled on-prem. A first version of SharePoint Online. And then components that today are better known as Teams, and that was the Office Live Meeting and the Office Communications Online. So all of a sudden, people could start take subscriptions instead of buying all these licenses and use them somewhere in a remote data center. So that were the first steps, even though at that time all the attention was still going to on-premise solutions. Although, if you watched carefully, we didn't know it at the time, but Microsoft also started to change their licensing model. We saw the introduction of notions like software assurance, meaning that as a company you could take kind of a subscription to always remain up to date with the latest software. Hey, isn't that what we have in the cloud today? With a clear distinction, still very valid today, between smaller organizations and bigger organizations, obviously. Whatever IT resellers sold, they made big money. I remember when we went to events and I was like parking my car and then walking through the entry of the event, I was always enjoying the view of the cars that IT resellers drove by. I do admit this is not a genuine picture, but that's the souvenir I had. Servers yielded a lot of money, licenses brought in a lot of money, and so basically what we call today box moving was the money maker at the time. And then there was this, emerging cloud computing thing with subscriptions that made it all like really untangible, a lot less more difficult to build a new business model on. And we still see today that for some partners, it is not easy to kind of focus on these subscription-based business models. Anyway, Microsoft at the time, and we are progressing in time, we are now about 2010, launched for the very first time something they called at the time Windows Azure, and BPOS had evolved into Office 365. And these were hosted in data centers, but if you look at fiscal year 2010, there were only a couple of them and a lot of data centers planned. Now, if we leap forward into time and we look at today, it's a totally different picture. We now have like this large, vast quantity of data centers worldwide with state-of-the-art technology, also very sustainable. Very important to not forget that the Microsoft, every new generation of data center is even more energy friendly and climate friendly. And that's where the magic happens today in this cloud. So we come from a long way, but if you look at how this evolved in, let's say, 10 to 14 years, it's absolutely amazing. And with that growth, of course, the number of threats also increased because Microsoft has always been a serious target for cyber criminals. And so both internally to protect their data centers, they increasingly paid attention to securing the environment, not only in a physical way, but also in an operational way, which now puts them also high on the Gartner charts for security solutions. Because the benefit for a customer is, of course, that we also see all of their knowledge and their data about cyber threats integrated in our current modern solutions. So way back from the 80s to where we are now, what a journey it was. A journey in which today you can build everything that you need in terms of IT on a solid foundation that is secure by design. It means that it's conceived with security as like the main driver to decide what you're going to put in there. It comes with infrastructure as a service. The old servers have now been replaced with virtual machines. You can launch, upscale, downscale, platform as a service, software as a service like Microsoft 365, and everything it takes to manage users, applications, devices, data, and the entire interconnectivity between them in the most comprehensive way you can imagine. So from nothing over computers with disks and complex licenses, today you can offer your customers an AI-driven, secure, productive, agile, and uninterrupted user and business experience. And I think this has never been seen before and is a unique value proposition you should definitely understand and feel. If you would put it all together, you might say that the Microsoft Cloud today, and as you've seen, it has been a matter of about 20 years, is now like the most comprehensive and trusted environment where you can put your IT. Whether you want do digital and app innovation, whether you want to keep your infrastructure up to date, your security, your modern work scenarios, your business applications, or just make the most out of your data and artificial intelligence, the Microsoft Cloud is definitely the way to go. In the next episodes, we will have a look at what is happening in that very cloud today. So you can expect a customer scenario where we will fit in all the pieces you saw in the house on the previous slide. And then, ladies and gentlemen, we warmly invite you to assist to our online interactive workshops where we will translate all that knowledge into value propositions for the people that we will be talking with. The CEOs, the IT people, sales and marketing responsibles, and HR managers. Stay tuned, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in one of the online workshops. Bye bye.